He threw the papers on the hospital bed before he even looked at her face. Not at our daughter, not at me, at the papers. I was still holding her, 4 hours old, wrapped in a blanket the hospital gives you, the one that's too thin for how much love is supposed to be wrapped up in it. And my husband, Daniel, stood at the foot of the bed with an envelope in his hand like it was something he'd been carrying around for months, waiting for the right moment to set it down. I didn't understand at first. I thought maybe it was flowers, a card, something a husband brings when his wife has just given him a 4th child. It wasn't flowers. My name is Claire. I was 34 years old the day my life split into a before and an after, and I want to tell you, really tell you, what it feels like when the person who promised to hold your hand through everything decides that a newborn baby is the last straw. This is not a story about a villain twirling a mustache. I wish it were that simple. This is a story about silence, about 4 words, and about the moment I finally understood that surviving someone is not the same thing as loving them. Let me take you back. Daniel and I met when I was 26, working the front desk of a dental office in a small town nobody's heard of unless they've driven through it by accident. He was charming in that easy way some men are, not flashy, not loud, just steady. He remembered small things, my coffee order, the name of my childhood dog. He used to say he wanted a big family, a house full of noise, kids running down the hallway in mismatched socks. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? We got married when I was 27. Our first daughter, Emily, came a year later. Then Sophie. Then Grace. 3 girls in 5 years, and Daniel, I have to be fair here, I have to tell this honestly, Daniel was a good father in the beginning. He'd come home from his job at the logistics company smelling like diesel and coffee, and he'd scoop up whichever daughter ran to him first, spin her around until she shrieked, ask her about her day like it was the most important briefing of his life. Something started changing after Grace. I noticed it in small ways, the way he'd sigh when I told him I was tired, the way conversations about money started ending with him staring out the window instead of at me. He started saying things like, "Three's a good number, Claire," in a tone that wasn't quite a question and wasn't quite a statement, just a thing he'd leave hanging in the air for me to pick up or ignore. I ignored it. I told myself it was stress. Bills, the house, normal marriage weather. Then I found out I was pregnant with our 4th. I remember standing in the bathroom with the test in my hand, feeling that particular kind of joy that comes with fear stitched into it. I sat on the edge of the tub for a long time before I went downstairs to tell him. I practiced the sentence in my head, "Daniel, I have something to tell you," like I was preparing for a job interview instead of telling my husband we were going to have another baby. His face didn't do what I expected. There was no smile, no surprise even, just a long pause, and then quietly, almost to himself, he said, "Okay." Not "that's wonderful," not "we're going to be okay," just "okay," like I'd told him the car needed an oil change. I told myself it was shock. People process things differently. I held onto that explanation the way you hold onto a railing on a staircase you don't quite trust. Over the next few months, Daniel grew quieter. He started staying later at work, or what he said was work. He stopped touching my stomach the way he had with the other 3, that absent-minded resting of his palm against the curve of me while we watched television. He'd sit at the other end of the couch instead. Small distances. The kind you don't notice accumulating until one day you look up and realize there's an entire ocean between 2 people who used to share a bed. I asked him once, straight out, lying in the dark with Grace's baby monitor crackling on the nightstand, "Are you happy about the baby, Daniel?" He didn't answer right away. I remember the ceiling fan ticking above us, that small metronome sound marking the seconds he let pass before he finally said, "I don't know what I am anymore, Claire." I didn't know what I am anymore. Not I'm scared, not I'm overwhelmed, help me. Just a man announcing, almost clinically, that he had become a stranger to himself. And somehow, in the cruel logic of exhaustion and love and denial, I decided that meant I needed to work harder, be softer, ask for less, make myself smaller so there'd be more room for whatever he was going through. I think a lot of women do that. We mistake shrinking for strength. The pregnancy was hard. I won't pretend it wasn't. My body was tired in a way it had never been tired with the other three, and I was chasing after Emily's homework and Sophie's tantrums and Grace's ear infections with a stomach that felt like it belonged to someone else. Daniel helped, technically. He did the dishes. He drove Emily to soccer. But there's a difference between a man doing tasks and a man being present, and I felt that difference every single day, like a draft coming through a window that's never quite shut all the way. My mother noticed before I let myself admit it. She came to visit when I was 7 months along, and after dinner one night, when Daniel had gone out to get some air, a phrase he used more and more, like the house itself had become something he needed relief from, my mother sat across from me at the kitchen table and took my hand. "Claire," she said, "is everything all right with you too?" And I did what I'd been doing for months. I smiled and said, "We're just tired. New baby coming, it's a lot." My mother looked at me the way mothers do when they know you're lying to protect someone who isn't protecting you back. She didn't push. She just squeezed my hand and said, "You call me. Whatever happens, you call me." I didn't understand, yet what she was preparing me for. The labor started on a Tuesday morning in March, 3 days before my due date. Daniel drove me to the hospital in near total silence, his hands tight on the steering wheel, his jaw doing that thing where the muscle jumps when he's holding something back. I remember thinking, between contractions, that I should ask him what was wrong. I remember deciding I didn't have the strength to hear the answer. She was born at 6:47 in the evening. We named her Hannah. They placed her on my chest, that warm, impossible weight, and for a few minutes, just a few, everything else in the world went quiet. I looked at Daniel, waiting for that look he used to get, that soft unraveling on his face every time one of our girls arrived. I wanted to see it just one more time. He was standing near the window with his arms crossed, looking at his phone. I told myself he was texting his mother, sharing the news. I told myself a lot of things that day. It was almost 11 at night when he came back into the room. The nurses had already helped me clean up, already dimmed the lights, already told me to rest while they took Hannah to be checked one more time before rooming in. I was alone with my new daughter, half asleep, running my thumb along the curve of her tiny fist when the door opened. Daniel didn't sit down. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He stood there in the doorway for a moment that stretched longer than any silence in our entire marriage. And then he crossed the room, and he set an envelope down on the tray table beside my bed, not gently, not the way you'd set something down near a woman who'd just given birth hours earlier, but the way you set something down when you want it to make a sound. "I can't do this anymore, Claire," he said. I stared at the envelope. My hands were still trembling from labor, and Hannah stirred against my chest, and some distant, disbelieving part of me thought, "This is a joke. This is exhaustion talking. This is a man who hasn't slept and doesn't mean it." I opened it anyway. Divorce papers, already filled out with his information, already signed. I looked up at him, and I don't know what my face looked like in that moment, but whatever he saw there didn't stop him. He kept talking, low and fast, like he'd rehearsed it in the car, in the parking lot, maybe for months before he ever said it out loud. "I never wanted 4 kids, he said. "I told you that. I told you 3 was enough, and you didn't listen, and now—" He stopped himself, ran a hand through his hair. "I can't keep pretending I'm okay with a life I never agreed to." "You never agreed to?" My voice came out cracked, quieter than I wanted it to be. "Daniel, she's your daughter. She's 4 hours old." "I know that." His voice broke slightly, just slightly, the only crack in the whole performance. "I know that, and I hate myself for it, but I can't keep lying to you. To myself. I'm done, Claire, I'm just done." I looked down at Hannah. At her closed eyes, her small mouth working in her sleep, utterly unaware that the man who made her had just declared, on the day of her birth, that she was the final weight that broke him. Something happened to me in that moment. I want to describe it honestly, because I think a lot of women who have lived through something like this will recognize it. It wasn't rage, not yet. It wasn't even grief. It was a strange, cold clarity, like waking up from a dream you'd been having for 8 years and realizing the room around you looks completely different than you remembered. I looked up at my husband, standing there in his coat, car keys already in his hand like he intended to walk straight out of that hospital room and into whatever life he thought was waiting for him without us. And very quietly, in a voice that didn't even feel like mine, I said 4 words. 4 words that made him stop reaching for the door. 4 words that made his face go pale in a way I had never seen before, not once in 8 years of marriage. 4 words that were about to change everything he thought he understood about the woman he was leaving behind. Daniel's hand was still on the door handle when I said it. I'm keeping the house. That was it, 4 words. Not a scream, not a sob, just flat, quiet, and certain, the way you'd state a fact about the weather. And I watched something shift in his face, like the floor had moved beneath him without warning. What? He said. The house, I repeated. It's in my name too, Daniel. My mother helped with the down payment, remember? I'm keeping it. And I'm keeping the girls, all 4 of them. He turned fully toward me then, car keys still dangling from his fingers. And for the first time all night, he looked less like a man delivering an ultimatum and more like a man who hadn't thought past the moment of setting that envelope down. I think, in his mind, he'd rehearsed my tears, my begging, maybe even my apology for the audacity of having his child. He hadn't rehearsed calm. You can't just, he started. I can, I said. You made a decision tonight, Daniel. You made it in a hospital room, hours after I gave birth to your daughter, and you don't get to make my decisions too. I heard you. Now you're going to hear me. Hannah stirred against my chest, and I lowered my voice instinctively, the way mothers do without even thinking, protecting a sleeping baby from a conversation that was breaking her parents apart in real time. Daniel stood there for a long moment, and I watched the anger in him look for a target and not quite find one. He wanted a fight. I wasn't giving him one. I was giving him something worse. Indifference dressed up as strength I didn't fully feel yet, but was determined to borrow until it became real. I'll have my lawyer call your lawyer, I said. You should go, Daniel. Visiting hours are over anyway. He left, just like that. The door clicked shut behind him, and I sat there in the hospital bed with my newborn daughter and an envelope of divorce papers on the tray table, and I let myself cry, but only for exactly as long as it took the nurse to knock on the door for the next check-in. By the time she walked in, I had wiped my face, and I was smiling at Hannah like the whole world hadn't just cracked open. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there running numbers in my head: daycare costs, my part-time job at the dental office that had become full-time 2 years ago, the mortgage, the 4 small faces depending on me to figure this out. Fear sat on my chest like a stone, but underneath the fear, something else was waking up, something that had been dormant for a long time. My mother came the next morning before I'd even called her. She said she'd had a feeling. He left, I told her, and I didn't have to explain the rest. She sat on the edge of my hospital bed and held Hannah while I finally let myself fall apart properly, quietly, into a pillow so I wouldn't wake the baby. You're not doing this alone, my mother said. Do you hear me? Not for one single day. The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork and pediatrician appointments and nights where Hannah cried and Grace cried in sympathy in the next room, and I sat on the nursery floor at 3 in the morning wondering how I was going to hold 4 children up when I could barely hold myself together. Daniel came by twice in the first month, once to collect his things, quick and clinical, like a man checking items off a moving checklist, and once to see the girls, though C is generous. He sat stiffly on the living room couch while Emily tried to show him a drawing and Sophie asked when he was coming home, and he gave answers that were technically words, but carried no real weight behind them. I watched my daughters learn, in real time, what it feels like to reach for someone who has already decided to be somewhere else. That was the part that nearly broke me, not the divorce itself, not really. It was watching 7-year-old Emily stop asking when Daddy was coming to soccer games. It was watching Sophie draw fewer pictures of our family and more of just the 5 of us, no father in the frame, without anyone teaching her to leave him out. Children absorb absence faster than we want to believe. I threw myself into surviving. I picked up extra hours at the dental office, and when that wasn't enough, I started doing bookkeeping on the side for a few small businesses in town, work I could do at night after the girls were asleep, hunched over a laptop at the kitchen table with a cup of tea going cold beside me. My mother came by 3 times a week to help with the girls. Some nights I was so tired I fell asleep sitting upright on the couch with Hannah on my chest, the television still murmuring some show I hadn't watched a single minute of. There were nights I cried in the shower so the girls wouldn't hear. There were mornings I put on real clothes and real makeup just so Emily wouldn't ask why Mommy looked sad again. I became very good at performing okay. And slowly, I want to be honest about how slowly, performing it started to feel a little more true. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. Daniel didn't fight for custody, not really. He agreed to alternating weekends that over time became alternating months, and then, eventually, whenever it was convenient for him. I used to be angry about that. Now, looking back, I think some part of me was relieved. A father who shows up halfway is sometimes harder on children than a father who's honest about how much he can give. I want to tell you something important now, something I didn't expect. About a year after Hannah was born, I ran into an old coworker from the dental office who'd left to open her own small accounting firm. We got to talking, and I mentioned the bookkeeping I'd been doing on the side, almost apologetically, like it was a hobby instead of something I'd built out of necessity and sleepless nights. She looked at me for a long moment and said, "Claire, you should be doing this full-time. You're better at this than half the people I've hired." I laughed it off. Then I went home and looked at my bank account and my 4 daughters asleep in their rooms, and I thought about how Daniel used to say things like, "You're not really a numbers person." Claire in that gentle, dismissive way that made me believe him without ever questioning it. I started my own small bookkeeping practice 8 months later. It was terrifying. I worked out of the spare room that used to be Daniel's home office, at a desk I bought secondhand, taking on 1 client, then 3, then 12. Some months were lean enough that I ate cereal for dinner so the girls could have something better. But it was mine. Every invoice, every client, every late night mine. 2 years passed like that. Not easy years. Not years I'd choose to relive. But years where something in me that had gone quiet during my marriage started speaking again, a little louder each season. Daniel remarried when Hannah was 3. I heard about it from Emily, who came home from a weekend visit and mentioned, very casually, the way children do when they don't understand the weight of what they're carrying, that Daddy's new wife didn't like when the girls were too loud. I remember standing at the stove with my back to Emily, gripping the edge of the counter, feeling something hot and old rise up in my throat. I didn't say anything cruel. I just turned around, knelt down, and told her that our house, this house, the one I kept, would never be a place where she had to be quiet to be loved. She hugged me so hard, I nearly lost my balance. By the time Hannah turned 4, the same age Emily had been the night everything fell apart, my little accounting practice had grown into something real. 6 employees. A real office downtown with my name on the glass door. I'd bought out Daniel's share of the house 2 years earlier, in cash, in a single transaction that felt, honestly, like the most satisfying signature of my entire life. I saw Daniel occasionally at school pickups, at Sophie's dance recitals, standing a little apart, a little smaller somehow than I remembered him. Once, waiting for Grace outside her classroom, he looked at me for a long moment and said quietly, almost like he didn't want to say it out loud, "You did good, Claire, with all of it. I don't know if I ever tell you that." I thought about the hospital room, the envelope on the tray table, the 4 words I said that night that I hadn't even fully believed myself when I said them. "I know," I told him, and I walked into the classroom to get my daughter. Sometimes, late at night, after the girls are asleep and the house is finally quiet, I think about that version of myself in the hospital bed, exhausted, terrified, holding a newborn while her husband dropped divorce papers on a tray table like they weighed nothing at all. I wish I could tell her what I know now, that the 4 words she said weren't really about the house. They were the first sentence of a woman deciding, in the wreckage of the worst night of her life, that she was not going to disappear. Hannah is 7 now. She doesn't remember any of it, of course, she was too small. But sometimes she asks about the scar on my heart she can somehow sense but not name, the way children do, and I tell her the truth in pieces small enough for her to hold. I tell her that sometimes people leave, and it feels like the end of everything. And sometimes, it's just the very beginning of who you were always meant to become.